All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to be talking today. It is a Monday. It's an Arlen Monday. Arlen, how you doing today?
I'm doing just fine. It's kind of crunch time here in Vermont for my wife Nancy and myself, because we'll be leaving Vermont in less than a week, next Saturday, and we'll be driving across the country with our dogs to California.
Sounds exciting. Quick question, maybe a long question. Do you get more excited about going back to Monterey or going out to Monterey, or do you anticipate the trip back east more in the springtime?
Well, it has a lot to do with the weather, Hal. When I go over there, it's usually July. The weather's, decent a lot of the time. It does get really hot, but it's nice. But this time of year, it's just very cold, and I'm looking forward to a little bit of warmth in California.
Well, you mentioned the weather. We will talk about the climate crisis later on in the program. Have you found the climate, have you noticed changes in the climate? I don't know how many years. It's been 3 decades now, 30 plus years you've been going back and forth across the country. Are you seeing real, obvious differences in the way the weather and the climate, the dynamic over that time period?
Yeah, I mean, I hear a lot of talk here about the climate is changing, and it's warmer, colder, rainier, or whatever. And it's here. It's, you just never know. It's day to day. It's different. I think it's it's hard for me to judge, but it's not real super cold here, but it is getting to freezing sometimes now.
So you've had below 32 degrees Fahrenheit temperatures. I was going to ask you that if there's been a freeze.
It's moving that way, of course, as we get later in the year and we get toward winter. So I'm sure we'll run into a lot of cold and strange weather as we go across the country, but that's just the way it is.
All right, Arlen Grossman with us. It's an Arlen Monday. We're going to talk politics as you always do on Halitics. That's why it's called Halitics, because it's kind of about politics. It's Hal on politics. I always, I say I always, but I didn't always, but I do now invariably begin the program with a report on the terrible situation in Gaza. And obviously there's many other places around the globe where we could go, but because the U.S. is so heavily involved in the Israeli, I call it a genocide. I think it's totally fair, the Israeli genocide there, because we're actively complicit in it. I feel an obligation morally to focus on it, just as I would hope I would have done if I was somehow, in Germany or in Europe during the 20th century Holocaust there. 76 more killed in Gaza, and Israel also ramping up attacks in Lebanon. That's yesterday, that state line yesterday, Arlen. So the situation is just as it continues. I mean, it's just, I don't know what to do about it. I'm going to ask you a quick question, but before, I just want to finish up my quick numbers here. We have I said 76 dead as of yesterday, and the total number now, according to, I guess it's the Palestinian Ministry they get those numbers from, but this is from Al Jazeera, 43,922 Palestinians killed since October 7. And so there's your numbers, and I always attribute it to the Harris-Biden administration. Don't worry, when Trump takes office, I will certainly change that to the Donald Trump administration, or I'll add them both, Biden-Harris and Trump administration. So I'm going to try to be even-handed in my condemnation of both groups. Arlen, we're going to talk about Ukraine, but before we get there, and it's in the conversation about Ukraine, did you anticipate, are you surprised, disappointed that the Harris-Biden administration hasn't had a word to say against the ongoing activities by the Israeli military since the election occurred?
No, I'm not surprised at that. I mean, they're out of the picture mostly. I mean, they're still in control, but it's just an ongoing tragedy, Hal. And right now we have a mystery. What is going to happen with Donald Trump? There's so many ways in which he could go. He could stop it. He could make it worse. it's just a mystery right now. And he's got a lot of wealthy Jewish people who will tell him what they would like to see happen, and he's very transactional, and he'll listen to them. And so I don't know what's going to happen, and nobody does, I think, at this time.
Well, I don't know. We hear that it could make things worse. Yes, it's true. Things could be worse, but I feel like that's a little bit of a cop-out argument just because things are so absolutely terrible right now. The killing just continues unabated as it has for a year. So I suppose it could get worse, but it's kind of hard to see how, short of the U.S. actually bombing Gaza. Right now, it's a slow motion eradication of that region. But you did want to talk about Ukraine, and we're going to get there. But I'm putting this headline up because there's a section in there about what Biden has done in Ukraine, and I want to juxtapose it. So this is over the weekend. You chose this article. I really appreciate you brought it to my attention, Arlen. I'm glad we're going to discuss it. This is a update that's in there, and it's just bleeding off the screen. I got to work on that somehow, not have that continue to happen. But the article was updated to reflect that the U.S. has lifted restrictions on Ukraine's use of American weapons to attack Russia. So our missiles now Ukraine can use to bomb or to hit Russia. And again, this goes back to that, but I'm going to use this to say we'll pivot to Gaza. Biden is saying, go ahead, kill more Russians, go ahead and make the war even more deadly. We can argue whether that's the right call or not, but he's certainly not trying to reduce the carnage there. Why then doesn't he? He's making a statement. You're saying it's up to Trump, but he's making a statement now about Ukraine. Why doesn't he make a decision to try to stop the killing in Gaza? What's that about? I mean, you argued, I know I'm putting you on the spot, but you argued that you hoped that they would get that after the election, there was no, you didn't have to worry about pissing off AIPAC anymore. And we would see the Democrats would show some empathy, compassion, and they haven't.
Well, here's what I'm thinking right now, Hal. The decision by Biden to allow the long-range missiles to go into Russia, I think may be part of a negotiation ploy, in that, if we're going to have a negotiation, the stronger that the Ukrainians can be and our support for the Ukrainians.
Oh, we lost you a little bit of freezing there. Go ahead. You said something about this is a negotiations ploy, and then I'm sorry, but you faded out.
Sorry. Well, yeah, there's going to be negotiations, and when that happens, the United States and Ukraine want to be in the strongest position that they can be. And this, using long-range missiles going into Russia is certainly a big step that will it will strengthen the position of Ukraine and the U.S. in any further negotiation.
That's an interesting position. I understand it. Makes some sense. But I don't think that explains why Biden isn't saying to Israel, stop right now, no more. Well,
okay, I'm sorry, I'm getting confused a little bit with Ukraine, but
no, I understand that there's an argument there. I understand it to put Ukraine in a stronger position to say to Russia, hey, we want this to end, but we're not going to give you everything you want. And here's the evidence. We're telling Ukraine, go ahead and attack Moscow. I understand that argument. And I think it makes some sense, actually. So I don't love it. I don't want to see more people killed. I'd rather the pressure start now to both sides to end it and to tell Russia, hey, if we have to, we will. We're willing to use weapons against Russia, but right now let's just end this killing. But I still don't understand the argument against telling Israel that's it. You can no longer use any weapons that we're not going to supply you with any weapons as long as you attack, as long as you kill Gazans. I just don't understand what reason there's not to do that.
Well, we're in a position now where the Biden-Harris administration has no real power anymore. Eventually it's going to be taken over by the Trump administration fairly soon. And so we want to make sure that, that Ukraine is in the best possible position it could be. And that's what we're going to, that's what we're trying to do, is make them as strong as they can.
No, I understand that, Arlen. I do. I think you made a really good point, actually, and one I hadn't really thought about. I think that is a good point. Again, I'm not sure. I'd have to think more about it, but I find it persuasive. My question, though, is why not tell Israel? I get why you tell Ukraine or why you give Ukraine the green light, because you're thinking maybe this will hasten peace. More killing of Russians might ironically lead to a potential peace deal. I hear that, or a better terms anyway for Ukraine. What I don't understand is the argument against putting the screws to Bibi over the last couple of months.
I think in both cases, there's going to be negotiations. So you have to figure out, what are our choices? What are our chances of getting the best negotiating position we can? And, as far as Israel goes, you don't want to weaken Israel at this point, because certainly Biden would get a lot of bad, press about that. So, I don't think he's going to do anything drastic or different. We're probably going to be in the same kind of position we are now when the negotiations do begin, and we hope to be in the best possible position we can be. I don't think Biden wants to weaken Israel's part of it.
All right, 240-242-5646 if you want to join us. We actually got a call last Monday, Arlen, from a friend that I had mentioned to you, but unfortunately that call came in after the program was concluded, so I couldn't get them on the air. But we have the phone ringing. I just heard it ring, so if you call in now, I'll take your call. So let's get to this article. I was really pleased to read this, and I may be wrong, but it seems to sort of endorse the point of view I've been arguing for well over a year now, Arlen. Is that right? A, and B, does that mean you've changed your mind, or you're just providing this with an example of how even the New York Times has missed the boat?
I changed my mind based on the current conditions that we're in now. It doesn't appear that Ukraine is going to win this war. The Russians are just going to go full out with everything they've got to win. And so I guess the best hope that Ukraine has would be some kind of negotiation where they're left intact, but they promise not to join NATO or anywhere else. And they'll probably lose some territory, which will be very tragic, but at least, the amount of killing that's going on is just horrendous. They're having trouble finding troops to fight against the Russians. So they're just in a worse position now than they've ever been in. And Russia shows no indication that they're going to slow down at all.
All right, thought leader, pundit Arlen Grossman with us, and he, of course, blogs at the bigpicturereport.com. Arlen, I'm remiss. I did not check your blog today or yesterday to see if there was anything new that you'd written. I know you do sometimes post links to other people's writing, which is always very instructive as well. So I appreciate that, but I'm going to assume you don't have anything new, or I would have gotten an email, correct, if it was something you had written?
Yeah. You're correct. I'm in the middle of writing some things, but they're not finished yet and not published yet. I've mostly been posting a couple of things by Tom Hartman, because he seems to be on the same wavelength as I am, that he understands that it's the powerful, wealthy interests that are really in control here, and it's gotten worse over the years, and with Trump it's going to get even worse. So I just like what Tom writes about it and how he looks at the situation, which is similar to the way I do.
You mentioned how terrible things are in Ukraine, and here we get the information from the Times: deaths outpacing births, and over 1 million casualties, with probably several 100,000 dead when you include both sides. So it's been an absolute tragedy. It's been a disaster for Eastern Europe. I don't limit that to just Ukraine now. I say Eastern Europe because Russia is certainly also suffering significantly. And whatever you think about Putin, I think we don't want the people of Russia to be victims as well. So it's a terrible thing.
Another thing that's developed that I think is important is that Russia has brought in North Korea to fight. Now you're getting a separate country, a different country involved, and that I would think that would change things. And maybe that's why Biden is willing to allow the long-range missiles to go into Russia, because it's a different situation. But in any event, it doesn't look good for Ukraine, that they've lost too much. They're going to continue to lose too much. And there has to be some kind of a negotiation that would be fair to both sides.
Does this failure of foreign policy ultimately by the Harris-Biden administration, and I certainly include Harris in there because, after all, she said during the debate, that the one debate she had with Trump, that she had been part of the negotiations, that she had actually put together the coalition that I guess they had thought would be able to defeat Russia in the end. Does that cause you to think, and I know you've always been more of a dove, not a hawk, Arlen, but does this cause you to become even more skeptical of American military adventures going forward?
Well, I've always been skeptical and worried about that, our adventures overseas, which often have been useless and unfair and just, very violent. But, now I'm disappointed with Harris because she could have fought back against Netanyahu and limited some of our money, some of our weapons that we're giving them. So we are complicit in what Israel's been doing, and I don't see yet any indication that has changed or will change. And certainly Harris didn't seem like she wanted to make that change.
All right, if you want to argue with Arlen and me, now usually you're arguing with just me, but now you can argue with both of us if you still support a continuing war against Russia, proxy war, as the author of this piece calls it. Please call in 240-242-5646. Also, click subscribe if you haven't yet done so. It's in the bottom right. There's a little Halitics square that I put up there that you can click on to subscribe. We'd love to have you do that. Does the fact, I know you've been very and I apologize for putting you on the spot with hard questions, Arlen, but you can certainly go back at me. Does the fact that it appears from what you're saying and what the Times is saying and what I've been saying, that Trump kind of got this right more so than Harris-Biden did when it comes to peace with Russia, does that cause you to be a little less harshly critical of Trump supporters? People who voted for Trump are like, well, this was an important issue and maybe they got it right. He got it right. So maybe we shouldn't condemn them to the degree that we've done so.
Well, Hal, unfortunately, it's all very unknown and a mystery because we don't know exactly what Trump's relationship with Putin is. If he's going to be, very positive toward Putin and allow Putin to get a lot of what he wants, or what. We just don't know for sure. So, that's going to be an unknown, and we just have to watch and see what happens.
I understand that. Makes sense for sure. So one of the concerns that the author raises, or doesn't even raise, just points out that if Trump does indeed push for peace, he'll get attacked for abandoning Ukraine and rewarding Putin. And I guess that's your concern too, right? That we're somehow giving in to this tyrant in Russia.
Well, we are, but under the circumstances, I think, we have to give up a little bit and negotiate the best possible position for Ukraine so they can still at least exist as a country, and hopefully find a way to prevent Putin from going further beyond Ukraine into other countries. So Yeah, I mean, there's always, we're divided about this. Our whole country is divided about this, and you do one thing and you're going to be criticized. You do another thing, you're going to be criticized. There's no way out of that. But right now, there's so much we don't know about Trump and what he really feels, what he, and he hasn't put up his foreign policy team yet. So it's, we just have to watch it and see.
Well, he's named a number of people. He named Rubio for State Department Secretary, and he named Tulsi for Director of National Intelligence. So that's a foreign policy team. Rubio has tended to be much more hawkish, especially with respect to Russia, than Gabbard, but even Rubio has pulled back a little bit on his aggression towards Russia, voting at least once against more arms for Ukraine. And then you have more the really the Zionist contingent that he's named for ambassadors to Israel, and that being Huckabee and Elise Stefanik. So I fear we're not going to see a change in policy towards Israel, which is very, very upsetting to me. That's the worst thing we're doing, is supporting what Israel's doing. But I am hopeful now. I'm more hopeful than I've been that maybe we really will, especially seeing this article in the New York Times. I'm sure the Times wouldn't publish it unless they had some reason to think Trump maybe really will be suing for peace with Putin. So I hope that happens. I think that would be good. I really want to just take issue with that, what I highlighted here. Ukrainians would be hung out to dry. My response is they're being hung out to dry now. They're being killed now. The country is being laid waste. So aren't we actually thinking of them by pushing for peace, if indeed we do that?
It's, it's really a kind of, like I say, it's very unknown. We don't know exactly what's going to happen. But right now, the United States is not giving full support to Ukraine. If we were, we would be sending in our troops or other troops to go in there. But right now, we're just kind of letting things go as they are and just, status quo. And that can't go on forever because people are just dying and the country is being, ravaged and destroyed by, Putin's bombs. So, would you support escalation? I mean, we obviously there is some escalation. Biden now authorizing missile launches into the heart of Russia. So you said you justified it or explained it, which I thought persuasively, as a negotiating ploy. Of course, lives will be lost as a result of that ploy, but okay. But would you support like actual American and NATO boots on the ground in Ukraine? No, I wouldn't, because that would be escalating the war, and that's the last thing we want, because Putin is not going to back down. And so, we could end up in a nuclear war, and we certainly don't want that. So I think, the best way, as I've mentioned, is just have some negotiation, make a deal where Ukraine loses a little bit, but at least they continue to exist and people can live. I think that's about the best we can hope for right now.
All right, Arlen, I got a couple little more segments from this article, but before I get to those, is there something that jumped out at you? You shared it with me that, really you thought was especially important to discuss or focus on that we haven't yet gotten to?
Well, of course, there's the mystery of what's going to happen during Trump's reign. And right now, the choices that he's picking is, cabinet members and other people, is kind of strange, and people are kind of scratching their head about it. Why is he choosing people like, the Florida Congressman Gates and, Robert F. Kennedy.
So let me just stop you for a sec, because I really wanted to focus for now. We'll get to that. That's fine. But foreign policy, and specifically Ukraine, because before I move to the next story, I was wondering if you had anything else you wanted to add with respect to the proposal in the Times now calling on Trump to do what I think a lot of us think he will do. That's Megan Stack, by the way, to withdraw are to sue for peace and to negotiate the best deal he can for Ukraine. So, did you have more you want to add to that particular issue?
The trouble is we don't really know what Trump's going to do, what he wants to do, what he thinks he can do. It just remains to be seen right now. And there'll be people that'll be vying for influence on him for their position, and that could be interesting too. So I just think it's too mysterious right now and too unknown to make any conclusions about all of this.
All right, fair enough. Arlen, we're going to move on to an essay you sent me about climate change and how the scientists can't explain the very, very rapid rise in temperatures we've observed over the past 15 months or so. But before we get there, you had brought up, and I wasn't going to talk as much about Gates and the other appointees today because I spent so much time last week, but I do want your take. You mentioned it, so go ahead and share your feelings about it and your uncertainty.
Well, I think what's going on is that Trump, wants revenge. He wants retribution, and Gates would be the perfect attorney general to do that. He will do whatever Trump wants him to do, and he will not investigate what Trump doesn't want investigated. So Trump is really working and pushing toward a dictatorship where he makes all the decisions, and it may not be universally liked, but he must be feeling really confident and cocky right now that he could do whatever he wants. And he virtually can, because he's got all of Congress, he's got the Supreme Court. There's really nobody that will, be pushing back against him other than people in his own party. And so, with Trump,
to that point, apparently there was some pushback, because at least that's what some pundits are attributing the decision to keep Mike Pompeo out of this new administration. He was, and I do want to thank Emogi for informing me of this. He was the CIA director and then the Secretary of State, I believe, under Trump in the first administration. So he's kind of a establishment figure, the old neocon wing of the Republican Party represented by Pompeo, and there apparently was a lot of pressure against him coming back. So we are seeing some pressure, at least from MAGA, against Trump that he is responding to.
The question is, what will the Republicans do? How far will they go in standing up to Trump? Because nobody wants to offend Trump or make Trump mad at them. So are they going to, I assume there are going to be some people that will not want Gates and will try to stop that. But if they, make Trump really upset about it, then they could hurt themselves. So there's a lot of unknowns here, as I've said.
Do you think Democrats should try to find areas where they can agree with Trump, where maybe they feel some of his nominations aren't that bad, and say that they'll support it? We did see that with Marco Rubio, John Fetterman saying that he actually will vote for Rubio. And I'm not sure, maybe that was something Debbie Wasserman Schultz also said. Of course, my take is that if Fetterman and Wasserman Schultz like Rubio for this position, he's probably especially bad for it. And so I do agree, though, that Democrats should try to stake out areas where they feel that Trump's picks aren't bad, but I just have very different views as to which those picks are. But what's your thought on that?
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. I think the Democrats have to move a little bit toward getting along with Trump, getting along with his party, and try to get something out of this. If they take an entirely point of view that they don't want anything to do with Trump and everything he does is bad, then that's not going to be very helpful. So I think they have to start thinking about how they can work with Trump and his people and get what little they can and try to prevent any really horrific things happening.
Did you have anything else you wanted to add with respect to some of Trump's cabinet picks so far? or that are coming down the road. I don't know if you had anything specific to say about RFK Jr. He's certainly been a lightning rod. Tulsi as well. Again, I'm just throwing out some thoughts you may want to opine on. I was especially the two bigs that really, really rankle me more than any others are those two ambassadors to the UN, Elise Stefanik. I can't think of anyone less diplomatic than she is, and Huckabee, who has adopted full-on Zionist language with respect to the Palestinian people. They basically, in his worldview, don't even exist. So those two are the most upsetting to me. Obviously, you have some different, well, at least there's others who bother you just as much. But anything else you want to throw on there, or maybe go in a different direction altogether?
Well, I think the one about Gates is the one that scares me the most because, he'll have total control over who's going to be prosecuted, who's not going to be prosecuted, who's going to go to jail, who isn't. So, his record, of course, has been, nothing but a fireball. He's been attacking everything and supporting Trump in every possible way. So he's the one that scares me the most because that would allow Trump to do whatever he wants as far as justice and crime and all that and retribution. So, what's Trump going to do about the January 6th protesters? Because he said, he's going to, he sees them as heroes. So, that's another interesting thing. We'll have to see what happens from that.
Yeah, I think that's clearly an area where Gates is not going to be using the resources of the Justice Department to file charges or prosecute in any way. So that is something that if you feel those people should be prosecuted, and I do think they should be, I think they trespassed at a minimum, and I don't know if I'd go so far as to call it an insurrection, maybe, but it was certainly an assault on the elected officials. I think the anger that many of them were feeling is understandable, but their specific reason for being angry in this case, I don't share. So I think there's a lot of reasons to worry about Gates. I have a different view. I don't find him to be as objectionable on balance as you do, but I think there are a lot of areas where there is good reason to look very, very, very closely at this pick and to worry about it.
You'll have to tell me what you find that to be possibly positive about Gates, because
he urged Trump when Trump was president to pardon Edward Snowden, and I think that was a very good thing for him to do. He has expressed real support for Lena Khan, the aggressive FTC trade commissioner. He supports her efforts to bring antitrust actions or to hold big tech, especially, to antitrust laws. Those are just a couple. There's others. He's not a climate crisis denier in any way. He's acknowledged human role in causing the planet to get hotter and hotter, and he has spoken out aggressively against the security state. He wants there to be less surveillance, and I think he's actually taken steps to try to rein in the security state. So I think those are positives from my perspective. Others may disagree. Those are areas where I actually think he's shown some leadership.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I didn't know there was anything good about Gates, but you're mentioning some things that might be good. But in the long run, of course, it's going to be Trump that's going to control everything, and it's going to be Trump's decision on all those things. So, we just, I'll tell you one thing though. There was one pick that Trump made just, I think maybe yesterday or something, was he got somebody in one of these cabinet positions that's going to go after the big tech companies, the Googles, the Facebook, and all that. And if anybody could stand up to those people in Amazon and so on, I think it was a great thing if they're allowed to go ahead and do something.
Let's hope so. Gates has said he would do that. Gates, as head of the Justice Department, he would have a lot of influence over that. So he has said, and I agree with you, look, this is going to be Trump's call. And just like we've seen with Democratic presidents, when they've had particularly progressive people in their cabinets, they've often stopped them from taking the steps that I'd like the administration to take. Certainly we can expect that Trump will do the same thing, but that would be good. Yeah, go after tech, and big tech in general, though not completely, supported Harris. But there were plenty of tech bros who supported Trump too. So I would be surprised, pleased, but quite surprised if he took real action to limit their power.
Of course, the really big tech guy is, of course, Elon Musk, and and he's a whole other matter actually about all this. But I think what I was referring to, I think, was an FCC possibly appointment yesterday, where he picked somebody who has a record of experience of just going after and criticizing all the big tech companies. So if anybody's willing to do that and able to do that, I'm all for it.
Trump's kind of a weird guy, man. I mean, he's hard to pigeonhole. I know, people have a lot of hatred towards him for a variety of reasons, but he's not a doctrinaire right-wing Republican in the George W. Bush, Dick Cheney mode. And as far as that goes, I think that's certainly better than being a doctrinaire Republican in the George W. Bush, Dick Cheney mode. That doesn't mean there aren't reasons to be concerned, very concerned, as Arlen is. 240-242-5646. Love to hear from you. Arlen, you flagged this for me. Yes, I didn't flag it for you. So tell us a little bit about this article. I was very intrigued by it. I was, again, you're sort of picking stories that are in my wheelhouse to a degree. I don't know if I'm having an effect on you or I'm not. we don't know. But tell us about this piece, and I'll go through it with the slides in a moment.
I'm sorry, which subject?
We study climate change. We can't explain what we're seeing. Do you not see that on your screen? You should be able to see it on your screen.
I do see it. I wasn't sure where you were going. But also, I wanted to say one thing about Trump. You're right. He's not an ideologue, which is a good thing. So he's very transactional. He changes his mind a lot. He can do almost anything, and it wouldn't surprise me, but the thing what I'm worried most about is the retribution against who he feels are the enemies, whether it's the media or Congress or anybody else. Nobody's going to. It's going to be hard to stop him from prosecuting people. Now, as far as climate change, that's of course a big one. Just because Trump doesn't believe there is man-made climate change or global warming, and so he's going to make sure that we're drilling for oil more and all those things, and that could only make the climate crisis so much worse, because if nobody's working on fixing it, it could only get worse. So that's very concerning to me. Let's see what else.
So I'm putting up this chart just real quick, apropos of what you're saying in terms of the actual data. And I showed a chart recently that showed how big a jump there was between 22 and 23, 2022 and 2023. This chart graphically shows it in a slightly different way, but you can see the highlighted and kind of the orange area. That's how much hotter 23 and 24 have been than previous years. And of course, this is on the heels of year after year, decade after decade of ever hotter temperatures. And even so, we're seeing temperatures getting hotter at an accelerated rate. So it's very frightening, Arlen, no question about it.
Yeah, and what this particular article talks about. These are two climate scientists who say, we're not really sure, how climate change is going, because there's no immediate knowledge that we could use, but they're saying, hey, let's track this stuff a little bit closer, more frequently, more recently, so we can see what's really going on and maybe make some decisions about how to work on that. But the way things are now, it's just there's no one particular thing that you could look at and say, oh, this is what's going to happen and this is going to happen. There's a lot of diversion. So if they have more frequent tracking of it, I think that would help.
Yeah, they're definitely concerned about the two scientists are definitely concerned about I guess the lack of as much data as they need, as much as they would like to have, and also what they express here, and I just put this on the screen. I hope you can see that, Arlen. They can't explain that's what they express. Their biggest concern is this very rapid increase in temperatures, notwithstanding what I mentioned before that we've already seen. Over the past 50, 60 years since the 1960s, very significant rises, and yet it's rising even faster than before. They can't explain it, and they say that makes them uneasy. I was somewhat taken aback by that statement. I don't know if you want to respond, but I'm going to just make this point, and you can address it. I was surprised that what they're uneasy about is that they can't explain it, rather than uneasy about the fact that it just keeps getting hotter. Whether you can explain it or not, we know what's causing this. Ultimately, there are some anomalies, but ultimately we know what's causing it. It's just that we keep pumping more and more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere by burning fossil fuels. So that's what I would think should make them uneasy.
Yeah, I think the worst thing about the whole thing is we know climate change is getting worse, and it's going to continue to get worse, and it is man-made. I think most people understand that, but yet you have a president as an entire political party that doesn't believe any of that, and they're going to go all out to, make man-made fossil fuels that much more frequent. And not only that, you have Europe is, the rest of the world, I think, is willing to do something about it. But the United States is really the only country that says, no, we're not going to do anything about it. And we are, of course, the most powerful of the countries and the ones that are the most polluting country. So, there's got to be a consensus about we have to do something about global warming. And I haven't seen it yet from this administration that's coming up.
Well, there isn't from either. I mean, to be fair, the Democrats are not good on this issue either. And it's true they don't deny the science, but that was never mentioned by Harris on the campaign trail, except to say she supports more fracking.
True, but I think the Republicans and Trump are just hostile toward the idea of, climate change. What they're most interested in, the bottom line is that they want to make more money, make more profits, and the only way to do that is to, go all out with production and not try to slow things down with all these regulations and rules and. That's
yeah. I mean, I'm with you there. I have very little hope, very little optimism. I think where we sort of disagree a little bit is I didn't have much hope. I was hopeless before the election, regardless of the outcome. I did not anticipate any meaningful, efficient, effective efforts to be taken to stop this crisis.
Right. You're right. So not enough from the Democrats, at least. There's something from the Democrats. They were willing to at least, look at lots of things and do what they can. Of course, they're often prevented from doing a lot by the other party. So, but at least they believe in the problem of climate change and global warming and are willing to do something about it. I don't see that from the Trump administration.
Well, if you deny there's even a problem, then you can't solve it. Although, again, Trump talks big about tariffs. I'm a big supporter of tariffs. One of the benefits from reducing global trade and Iranian globalization is that the trade is actually a major source of greenhouse gas emissions. All the container ships plying the oceans generate a lot of greenhouse gases, as do airplanes jetting across the skies. And also manufacturing in Asia is cheaper in part because they have less controls over emissions than we do. So even though his tariffs aren't ostensibly for the purpose of protecting the planet in any way, they might and should, in fact, have some salutary effects in that area. So one of the other points, and yeah, you can respond to that in a moment, Arlen. Just let me throw this slide up too. They write, things are out of our control. People are afraid. People are worried. which we should be, and the climate is changing faster than we can adapt. Well, it most certainly is. But they also go on to say that if we understood better, we might be able to say, oh, we're not going to get these worst case possibilities. But I don't know why they would say that. I feel like the Times kind of went out of their way to find slightly what you'd call more reasonable, what they would call more reasonable, more moderate climate scientists, rather than those who are, saying, hey, we've really blown it yet again.
Yeah. Well, what I've always felt for a long time, Hal, is I've doubted that our civilization has much more than a generation or two to go on because of two things. And I think one of them is weapons of mass destruction, nuclear war. I think that's a good chance that might happen in the coming years. And the second thing is climate change. If that could really ruin our entire planet if it continues to do what it's been doing. And, pretty soon we're going to be losing all the animals. We're losing the ocean. We're going to be pretty much be unable to live anywhere near like we've been living up to now. So that could destroy civilization also. So just
yeah. See, I think we're already it's sort of like when people say, oh, Trump could make things even worse in Gaza. And I'm like, well, it's genocide right now. So when people say, oh, the climate change, the climate catastrophe, the climate holocaust, whatever you want to call what I call it, could be worse. Well, this is from over a year ago. Axios, the sixth mass extinction is underway and rapidly accelerating. So this is well over a year since this came out. In the year since this came out, we've seen it get even hotter at an accelerating rate. So again, I don't know how much worse it could get.
How it could always get worse anytime, anywhere. When even with the Israeli Gaza situation, could always get much worse. And climate change could also get much worse. There's no limit as to how bad things can get, in my opinion.
Anything else you want to add to the climate change article that we've been discussing? I've gone through it. I left a few parts out, but we've got some other topics. I also just want to again remind listeners, please join us. This is your opportunity to talk to Arlen, who's always, not always, but usually with us on Mondays, but won't be with us for a 3 weeks, I guess, while he wends his way back to beautiful, the golden state of California. So this is your chance, 240-242-5646. And I've told folks, if you're commenting, we don't seem to have as many viewers as possible. I don't know. That's unfortunate. There's Emogi. Why? All right. So some questions from Emogi and Shade. I don't always, and I've said this, Arlen, if you want to converse with us on Mondays, it's better to call because I don't always have the bandwidth to be staring at the chat while talking to you. But a couple of questions for you. One is, why isn't the peace movement bigger? Do you have a response to that, Arlen?
It's been terrible from what I've seen. Over the last few decades, the peace movement has died down. The progressive movement has died down. I think it's because there's powerful forces that are pushing the other direction. And that I'm talking about the really rich people, the billionaires, the big corporations. They don't want any part of this kind of progressive thinking. They want to, again, they're just about profit, about making money, and whatever it takes to make more money, that they're going to do that, and they don't really care about anything else.
Arlen, you may remember when I was living in Monterey before the Obama election, there was very active peace movement protests on the streets of Lighthouse Avenue that largely, not completely, I don't want to overstate it or exaggerate it, but certainly the crowd size dropped significantly after Obama became president. And part he did take us out of Iraq, but then he accelerated or expanded us again into Libya and other places. Do you think the fact that we're getting a Republican in the White House may lead to more protests by Democratic peaceniks, if you will?
That remains to be seen. Right now, I think everybody's discouraged and upset and worried, and they don't feel, like they have much power at all, and they really have very little. But let's see. Yeah, so but I think if things get considerably worse, if Trump does some of the worst things that he's talked about, then you might see some pushback. I mean, right now the women's movement is pretty much has died down a lot because there was. Remember the last time he got elected, there was this gigantic march in Washington in 2017, and now there's nobody talking about anything like that. Like it can't happen right now. So I'm hoping that these groups, whether it's women groups, peace groups, uh, anything progressive, will have to react to some of the worst things that Trump is going to do, and maybe start up again. But right now, I think everybody's really discouraged and not too good about feeling they can go on the offensive.
All right. Well, you mentioned women's movement, Arlen, and I know before the election you were saying you hope more women would vote than men. Apparently, though, even though you voted the way at least the author of this piece wanted, I did not, by the way. You're still in trouble here. According to her, men maybe not. So they're going to throw you in this big pool, me, Trump voters, Harris voters, it doesn't matter. Heterosexual women are, at least according to this article, pissed off, and they're going to do something. I'm not quite clear what. Do you think we need this united women against men to respond to this crisis that we're facing?
Well, no, I don't think that's a good idea. We certainly don't want to, get the genders fighting each other. That's not good for the planet or for people in general. So, I understand, there are some issues and there are some right-wing people that helped Trump get elected, men, and who felt that maybe they're losing a lot of their clout and power, and so I hope that will die down, and I hope people will get a little bit together more on that and try to figure out what to do, because there is a gap in the genders in several ways, and we need to talk about it and do something about it.
Well, this is nothing new. Back 2,500 years ago. Are you familiar with this play? You're an academic. You're a well-educated man, Arlen. Were you aware of this Sophocles play, I believe, or maybe it's Aristophanes? I'm not sure. Lysistrata.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a common story that if women withhold sex, that they could get what they want and stop wars and all that, and it's happened in the past, or at least it's been thought about in the past. So yeah, I'm aware of it, and but I don't think it's really ever worked anywhere.
I'd have to go back and read that play. I was surprised, I mean, I certainly was familiar with it, but when you think about it, we often hear about how, male-dominated Europe has been forever, and yet it wasn't considered crazy for a playwright man to write a play saying women might band together and decide they're not going to sleep with their boyfriends and husbands. And this is, again, 420 BC Athens. So what I think is weird, because if women must have had some agency that they could say to their husbands, we're not going to have sex, when the idea is, a woman is a piece of property. Her husband can do whatever he wants. Her father can do whatever he wants with her. And yet these women apparently had at least enough agency where in a play they could say, no, we're not going to sleep with you. In fact, we're not only going to not sleep with you, but we're going to actually tease you and be provocative and seductive and then pull the rug out from under you when you're ready to go. Pretty interesting. Maybe times aren't quite as different today as we like to think.
And there's another issue I think we need to think about too, because right now in our culture, we're getting more and more isolated, working, using our phones and not getting together with people as much. And I worry that there's a lot of men out there who are not getting sex. And I think we've seen a lot of those guys who are the ones that are the serial killers and the mass shooters and so on. And we need to really look at that, because if they're just looking at their phones and looking at porn, then we're not going to get the kind of interaction with the sexes that we used to have, and it could be, really bad for a lot of people.
Really interesting stuff, Arlen. I mean, I don't really want to lump in serial killers with the mass of people. I don't know that there's, but your point is well taken. I mean, you have the incel movement, which is, I don't know if you're familiar with that, men who are celibate but not voluntarily. So incel, involuntarily celibate, young men who cannot find sex partners, who are not in relationships, and they're not happy about it, as you say. And to me, a major reason for this, there's so many things, but and your point is very well taken. I mean, I think inequality is a huge part of this, and you see this in a lot of countries where men don't have good opportunities. They're not able to, hold down or find a living wage job. Society is so competitive. Basically, we have a winner-take-all society, and women biologically, and you can argue with me all you want, I don't really care. Well, I'm happy if you argue with me, do tend to prefer, they are biologically driven to prefer men with significant or substantial resources that can be used to raise a family, their family. So when we have massive inequality, we have so many men who have no real prospects, no real resources. They're not going to be able to find spouses. They're not going to be able to find mates. And women are going to say, well, I'm not going to have a child if my child is going to be likely to be homeless or poor and will have very lousy life prospects. So again, the way to address this would be reduce inequality. As I always say, we need a society where everyone has enough and no one has too much. Democrats haven't done that. They haven't done that.
No, they've been very disappointing, and that's probably why they lost, because they weren't the party of the working class anymore. And, they were willing to go along with all the big money and the donors and thought that would be enough, but obviously it wasn't. So at some point, the Democrats hopefully will figure out a way to, support the unions, support workers, support, middle-class people, lower-class people. But it'll be a problem doing it just because all the money is, of course, on the side of the restrictive billionaires and corporations. So there's going to have to be some really good thinking and some ideas to change the Democratic Party. And I don't know exactly how it's going to be done, but it needs to be done.
When you think about this idea to reject men, to me, one of the most absurd points is you're lumping everyone together. You make this point too, Arlen. It's like we're judging people based on their sex, not on what they've done. I mean, there are plenty of guys who are pro-women and allies of women, even probably some who voted for Trump and in other ways have been very pro-women. So and you made this point, I think, very well, is this kind of divides us into warring camps when we really should be united, fighting for a better future.
Yeah, that's absolutely essential. We have to work together. And, if we're fighting amongst each other, then that obviously is not going to be helpful at all. So,
what do you want to see people getting together to do? What would you like to see? Because I think we both agree we need more unification, more organizing, but in support of what?
Well, maybe some laws have to change. If you look at the statistics, I mean, men going to college and getting certain degrees are much lower than women, and maybe we have to figure out a way to get them in into more universities and better jobs in order to make any of this happen. And I suppose it just depends on what area we're talking about, but definitely men and women have to work together to make a better society. And if we're divided, that's not going to be good at all.
Yeah, we see it the same way, Arlen. All right, I got one more story with the holidays coming up. You won't be with us next week. I didn't billboard this to you, but I just really couldn't resist. So what to do if you're going to an event or there will be somebody with very different politics at your holiday meal? What should you do? Here's Joy Reid taking what I would say is not probably the high road. Here we go.
So apparently some folks on the right have been thoroughly triggered by the segment we did here on the Readout last week, in which a Yale-trained psychologist counseled those who are distraught about the results of the presidential election and frankly frightened over the prospects for their own lives because of it, that they do not owe the people who voted for the very things they're terrified of their time over the holidays.
There is a push, I think just a societal norm that if somebody is your family, that they are entitled to your time. And I think the answer is absolutely not. So if you are going to a situation where you have family members, where you have close friends who you know have voted in ways that are against you, like what you said, against your livelihood, and it's completely fine to not be around those people and to tell them why.
All right, so you're, I mean, it's the way it's framed is so bad, Arlen, but I want your response because there's something in there that I think maybe we can kind of agree with that kind of agrees with what she said a little bit, but I want your thoughts.
Yeah, I'm more toward Joy Reid on this one. I think, we have to find a way to get together, to talk with each other, to find common ground. There's no sense, dividing the country in such a way that we can't even talk to people who think differently than we do. So, I kind of agree with Joy Reid that we need to find a way to get together and treat each other with respect.
I didn't think she said that, but maybe I missed it. I thought Joy Ann Reid was on the side of her guest, which is, nope, you don't want to be, somebody votes against you, against your livelihood, you just cut them right out. I obviously don't agree with that. I think we need to talk to each other. We need to listen to each other. But where I will kind of agree with is there may be people that are toxic, right? That you can't talk to. And I fear that sometimes I'm that person who is very difficult to be around. And so if someone's going to, by their behavior, not their voting, not their politics necessarily, but because of the way they talk, because of the way they act with you, then I get it. Yeah, I don't want to be around them. They're going to be making fun of me. They're going to make fun of my candidate. They're going to make fun of my party. They're not going to listen. I understand why you wouldn't want to be around that person, and maybe that makes sense.
I'm going to give you credit, Al. I think that you are pretty good on this, because on your show, anybody can say anything they want, and your views are not totally one way or another. You have positions that are maybe different than the typical progressive. So, somebody like you're willing to do that. And I think hopefully a lot of other people are willing to do that too, because we just can't live in a country that's going to be like the Civil War in the 1860s. We have to live together and work together to make a better world.
Well, I'm better on my live stream sometimes than I am in the personal realm. So, we all have our different spheres. And so this is where I like to think I can get along with people better than I do in other places. With politics, it's funny because back when W was running, I was so against him. I mean, for so many different reasons. And I don't regret that. I thought he was a terrible, terrible candidate. And I think Trump is really bad. I don't want to make it sound like I think Trump isn't really bad. But I felt, Arlen, this is a distinction. I really did believe Al Gore and John Kerry were both significantly superior, and that there were reasons to vote for them, that they would be good, probably good presidents. Whereas I thought Bush, and I think I was right, would be and was a terrible president. I have not felt, especially with the two women running, that they would be would be clearly better than Trump. There were areas where I felt both Hillary and Kamala were just awful. And I just, and I wanted to vote for Harris. I never wanted to vote for Hillary because I knew her record. But I did want to vote for Harris. I thought if she could just give me something, and she just didn't. And so I'm now more focused on policies. Where do you stand on Israel? Where do you stand on Ukraine? Where do you stand on Medicare for all? And that's where I feel like I would get into trouble. Because if someone said, oh, yeah, for-profit healthcare, we can't go to that commie socialized medicine route, that would trigger me. And I wouldn't be the reasonable, good listener, easygoing Hal that you've and others have come to know and love on Halitics.
Democrats are tough because they talk a good game, but when you come right down to it, people like Clinton and a lot of the other Democrats, they eventually pretty friendly toward the business community, toward the people who have money. So they don't do what they could do and what people expect them to do, or think that that they're the party of the working people when they're not actually that anymore. So the Democrats are hard to really like 100%, but I think they're better than anything on the other side.
All right. Well, that can be your final word, Arlen, because that was kind of a nice coda there with they're better than anything on the other side. And I can leave it at that. Or if you want something else to throw on to the log pile, since this is your last opportunity in this month to address our monstrous audience for watching right now. That's not too bad. The numbers have been getting, I think you probably noticed there have been some sizable audiences for some of the recent podcasts, although nothing like the competition has.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we've covered just about everything today, so I don't think there's anything else I need to add. But it's going to be an interesting next 4 years, and nobody really knows what's going to happen. And I certainly am not going to predict what's going to happen. So we'll just have to wait and watch.
All right, Arlen, I'm going to wish you a great Thanksgiving, and maybe we'll talk before then between us, but not on Halitics. And for viewers, obviously, I'll be here for the rest of the week and part of next week as well. So thanks to all. Arlen, you have a great weekend trip back to Monterey.
Yeah, and happy holidays to you and your family. I hope that it comes out as well as you hope it can be.
All right, and that'll do it.